Hey guys, it's now December 3rd. It's actually pretty late. Sorry about that. It's already 4:40. But because today I wanted to read my short story to you guys as my video. So yeah, but my story isn't done yet. So I will make that video of me. I'm gonna read it to you. I will make that as soon as my story's done. I've got like a few pages to go. But so yeah, today I'm wearing my scarf. Yay! Alright. So I'll read you my story now as soon as it's done. Bye.
Alright guys, I actually haven't finished my story yet, but I'm going to read you what I have so far, and then tomorrow I will finish it and read you the rest for my next video. Okay, so I will now read you my story. Hope you enjoy!
Nefarious was awoken once again by the downpour of rain against tin, and he rose to his feet, trying to shake the sleepiness from his limbs. He'd only gotten 2, maybe 3 hours of rest, if he didn't count each time he'd gotten up to fix a leak or move the sofa to a dry area. Though, even on dry nights, he never managed to sleep much longer than this. He took a few wobbly steps forward and leaned against the windowsill as he waited for the dark room to stop spinning. Gazing between the wooden planks that barred the window, he squinted, trying to see through the curtain of water as it drained down from the sky. The storm was so heavy that he could barely make out the horizon, but from what he could tell, the sun still hadn't risen. He suppressed a groan, but grabbed his coat and headed out the door nevertheless. Putting on his hood so that it covered both his head and most of his face, Nefarious made his way down the rain-splattered sidewalk towards the center of town. One bonus to being up this early was that he wouldn't run into too many people. Most humans didn't show up in town until at least 5 a.m., and it must have been around 4 at the moment. He stopped by the fast food restaurant and ordered a breakfast sandwich, hesitantly letting another couple dollars slip from his thinning pockets. He ate it quietly outside the restaurant, thankful that it was open 24/7, but still unhappy with the taste of human food. He finished it despite this, since it was better than nothing, before making his way back down the sidewalk. He browsed the shop windows as the first lights began to turn on, and as more cars began to show up on the streets, his anxiety rose, and he found himself heading back towards his so-called home. Nefarious awoke once again, but this time his surroundings were painfully bright. Confused, he tried to sit up, but his head throbbed persistently. Deciding to rest for a moment, he looked around as well as he could in such brightness, and saw that he was back home, though he was lying on the floor rather than the couch, where he usually slept. After a moment of thought, he realized that he must have walked home, but had passed out from lack of sleep before he could reach the sofa. He grumbled to himself and attempted to sit up once again, but finding that it was hopeless, rolled onto his side and pushed himself up using his elbows. The feeling of overall weakness surprised him, but he refused to let it bother him. He stood up and nearly fell over again, but he regained his balance at the last second. "Human legs are useless," he groaned, fumbling towards the couch. The carpet was still wet from the storm, but there was nothing he could do about it. In fact, there was nothing he could do about anything. He had no memory, no family, no friends, no car, no job, no purpose, no home, and hardly enough money to last another week. He was basically waiting to die. Despite his condition, he somehow managed to walk to the coffee shop, and watched his funds dwindle further as he sat down to enjoy some caffeine. His mind began to wander, and he didn't notice a girl walk up to him from behind the counter. Excuse me, sir," she asked, startling him. He turned to face her, but suddenly looked away after seeing her shocked expression. As she began to stutter, he tried his best to suppress a growl. "What is it?" he grumbled, avoiding eye contact as he gazed down into the half-empty coffee cup. "It's just your eyes." "Not that. I mean, what do you want?" "Oh, sorry, you left this at the counter." His eyes flickered slightly as the girl placed some coins on the table beside his hand. Raising an eyebrow, he cautiously returned his gaze to the girl, who was blushing slightly with embarrassment. She seemed to grow even more uncomfortable as Nefarious continued to look at her with a blank expression. "The coffee was only $2.75. You gave me $3. "Oh, I did, didn't I?" Nefarious sighed, taking the extra change and placing it carefully into his pocket. After a long, awkward moment, he growled, wondering why the girl still hadn't left. He just wanted her to leave, but he had to remember to be polite. "Can I help you?" he asked, forcing his tone to remain neutral. "I'm sorry," she mumbled, shifting awkwardly, "but something's really bothering me." He raised an eyebrow as if he cared. Oh, and what's that? What's wrong with your eyes? I mean, they're so blue? Nefarious asked before shrugging. I don't know. It's just the way they are, I guess. The girl nodded, but still didn't leave. Nefarious was starting to get annoyed. He wasn't used to being around people, but talking to them was out of the question. I haven't seen you around here before. Are you from out of town? Do you ever stop talking? Nefarious growled, glaring directly at her again. This caused her to jump back slightly, and he suddenly noticed that a few other customers had begun to stare. His heart began to pound as he felt eyes on him from all around. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to pry. It's fine, Nefarious choked out, his pulse quickening rapidly. It's just, I have to go. He staggered to his feet and raced out the door, leaving his coffee behind as he tried to get as far away as possible. He could feel eyes on him still and quickly ducked down into an alley, breathing heavily as his head spun uncontrollably. His vision blurred, and he fell to his knees, gasping for air. A pair of fangs began to protrude from his upper gums, causing a shock of pain to flow through his body. He clenched his teeth as if to prevent the transformation and cursed beneath his breath. No, I can't. He whimpered in pain and fell to his side, his vision pulsating with each throb of his forehead. At this point, he knew that transformation was unavoidable, and all he could do was be thankful that he was out of sight. He painfully endured the next few moments, trying to relax as his muscles and bones shifted position and stretched to different lengths. Finally, he relaxed, panting heavily as his vision slowly returned to normal. The transformations were always painful, but the feeling of not having to hide anymore was a relief as well. After regaining his strength, he got to his paws and shook himself. Being a dog was easier than being human in more than one way, but was also more dangerous, since it wasn't exactly normal to see a big black dog wandering the city streets. Humans aren't too kind to animals either, so that was always a risk as well. He peeked around the corner, watching cautiously as people walked by, not seeming to notice him. After a moment, he decided it was safe and stepped out onto the sidewalk, glancing back at the coffee shop for a moment. He froze, seeing the girl standing just inside, but remembering that she wouldn't notice him in dog form, he took off in the other direction. The next day, Nefarious somehow found himself back in that same coffee shop. He sat at the table furthest from the front desk, sipping his coffee quietly as he pretended to read the newspaper. Though he was distracted, for across the room the girl he met yesterday was talking with a customer who was apparently her friend as well. Oh, and I almost forgot. What is it? The girl's friend asked. The strangest thing happened yesterday, the coffee shop girl continued. I saw this big black dog just outside the shop. Nefarious tensed. She saw me? It looked mostly normal, other than being bigger than most dogs. I mean, how would somebody even keep a dog that big? Apartments only allow dogs under 20 pounds. It must have been a stray, her friend shrugged. I guess so. Nefarious forced himself to relax. After all, there was no possible way that she'd recognized him. But then, things got even stranger. You see, the dog turned and looked right at me. What's so weird about that? Well, get this, she continued, but lowered her voice slightly. It had blue eyes. Nefarious' pupils shrank slightly as he tensed once again. So, some dogs have blue eyes. It's not that weird. I know. But these ones were different. They were, well, unique. I'm not sure how to explain it, but it felt as if I'd seen them somewhere before. You're losing it, Katie. The girl shook her head and sighed. Yeah, I guess you're right. I must be imagining things. Either way, shouldn't you be getting back to work? Oh, I almost forgot where I was. I'll have to catch up with you later. Nefarious was still awestruck, baffled by the fact that she'd seen him, and especially that she recognized his eyes. He tried to relax again, but for some reason he couldn't. At least she didn't know it was me. But either way, I should get out of here before she remembers. He stood and turned, about to make his way towards the door when something rammed into him, sending hot coffee all over his shirt. He bit his lip hard, trying to keep himself from crying out in pain. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, I didn't see you there. It's okay, it was my fault, Nefarious grumbled, carefully adjusting his now stained shirt. I wasn't watching where I was. The moment he looked up, he froze, terrified. His heart stopped beating as he stared directly back into the eyes of the girl standing before him. The same girl that had given him his change the day before and seen him as a dog. The same girl that had just been talking with a friend about him. For a moment, they just stood there, staring at each other as if time had stopped. Nefarious' heart began to race, and he felt his face start to burn up as his vision focused directly on her and nothing else. Please don't remember. Please don't remember. Suddenly the girl began to stutter, and her eyes widened. Wait a minute, she gasped. No, no, no. Those eyes. You're that guy from... And that dog. I don't know what you're talking about, he sputtered, swaying slightly as he began to feel dizzy. But you were here. And then you left, and that big black dog appeared, and... As he noticed more and more people staring, he was unable to take it, and moved around her, heading quickly for the door. He had to leave. He had to get away. He couldn't be exposed. He couldn't let her find out. Wait! Suddenly the girl grabbed his hand and pulled him back. Nefarious' heart skipped a beat as he avoided looking at her, terrified of what she'd tell everyone if she knew what he was. But for some reason, he also felt very calm, and his pulse began to slow down again. Was it because she was holding his hand? Please wait, she pleaded quietly, and for a moment he could sense the loneliness in her voice. He turned slightly and hesitantly gazed over his shoulder. He tried pleading with his eyes for her not to say anything, to forget what she'd seen, or what she thought she'd seen. At least tell me your name. Nefarious blinked. He hadn't been expecting this. My name? After a moment of thinking, and gaining a sudden boost of courage, he sighed and turned to face her more directly. Well, I guess telling her my name wouldn't hurt, right? It's Grimm, he said quietly, lowering his gaze. Nefarious Grimm. She stared back at him for a long moment before he turned and left the coffee shop. He jogged down the sidewalk for a while before slowing to a walk, breathing slowly as he went over what had just happened. Did she really make the connection that the dog had been him? Was it really that easy to tell? Hey, Mutt! A raspy voice shouted. Nefarious turned, but saw no one. Shaking his head, he turned back, but now 3 men stood before him. He shifted slightly, eyeing them nervously. What? Was that you got all over your shirt? The man in the middle sneered. Nefarious growled slightly, an uneasy feeling settled in the pit of his stomach. Coffee. Ah, right. You've been real close with the coffee lady, huh? He chuckled, wiping his nose with his sleeve. She dump you or something? What are you talking about? Nefarious snapped. I barely even know her. Don't lie to me, mutt. I seen you and her talking. You got a liking to her, eh? Nefarious blinked, his heart skipping a beat as her face popped into his head. What? No way. There's no way I'm falling for her, right? No, it's impossible. We only met the other day anyways. The man gave a crooked grin, but it faded and his eyes darkened eerily as he moved toward Nefarious. Catching him off guard, the man shoved him up against the nearest wall, pinning him there as Nefarious gasped for air. I told you not to lie to me, the man shouted, causing Nefarious to quiver slightly. Look, kid, you better stay away from little Miss Katie or I'll pound you to such a pulp that nobody will recognize you. Nefarious growled. And who are you to tell me what I can and can't do? The man gave a snarl and punched him in the jaw, causing Nefarious to yelp in pain. He struggled to free himself from the man's grasp, but his energy was quickly draining. The world around him had begun to spin as his lip curled into a foul smirk. His heart began to pound beneath his chest as his anger boiled, and he felt his fangs begin to form. You got something else to say, mutt? The man laughed darkly, pulling a knife from his pocket and holding it to Nefarious' neck. Yeah, Nefarious said, his pupils thinning. As a matter of fact, I do. The man snarled again, pressing the knife slightly against Nefarious' throat. Oh yeah? And what's that? You're pathetic. The corner of the man's lip twitched as he lowered the knife. You're gonna pay for that. The man roared with anger and threw Nefarious against the wall, allowing him to crash to the ground as his painful cries filled the air. All 3 men came at him at once, punching and kicking Nefarious as his vision fluctuated, his transformation beginning. Grimm!